So today I'd like to talk to you about the blur lines. They say that when you get old, when you age, you become more savvy. Well, in my case, I just turned 42 a few months ago. What I learned is that I got a very practical new hairdo to start for, and I'm starting to lose my near vision. So everything is kind of blurry if I do this. I consider that a good thing. It allowed me to understand that in this world there are much fewer black and white that I could imagine, much fewer demarcation lines, and a lot of shades, a lot of spectrums. And I want to walk you through a few of those and how they relate to technology, to IT, and to open source. So, first of all, let me introduce myself. Yay, hello. So the way to pronounce my name is Gianugo Rabellino. I'm an Italian guy, recently moved to the US. And I pride myself of being a sort of an old-timer in open source. I started with Linux 0.99 patch level 15. Back then, I joined, the first community I joined was exchanging messages over UUCP. So that may bring some memories to someone in the audience. And since then, I consider myself a very, very lucky guy, because as I like to brag, I was able to put food on my plate for nearly the last 20 years with open source. As you can see, it has been a sizable amount of food. Recently, I joined Microsoft as Senior Director for Open Source Communities. May sound counterintuitive to a few of you. I mean, an Apache member joining Microsoft, there are a lot of reasons for that. And I believe that Microsoft is an awesome, awesome place to do open source nowadays. And I'd like to show you why before we delve into the main topic of today. So I'll give you the 10,000 feet view. This is Building 24 in Microsoft. This is where I work. And part of my job is going out and reach out to product groups and talk about our open source engagements. So after 9 months on the job, I've been touring the Redmond campus, which is, by the way, a pretty cool place to be. 60 or so building, full of Microsoft people. May sound disturbing, it is not. It is actually pretty good. And so I'm able to show you what I call the map of open source sightings at Microsoft. And this is it. This is the Redmond campus. Come visit, by the way. Again, 60 building. I've been visiting 36 of those as of today. I'm sure I'm missing something. And 2 years ago, I wouldn't have guessed that more than half of the buildings in Microsoft had someone that was dealing with open source. But that's the case today. And by the way, that means that a lot of my job requires me to drive around campus. I'm doing it in style, the Italian way, usually not with my daughter. I do that only on the driveway. But I want to debunk another myth. Not only Microsoft is more open than you think, you can also have a motorcycle in Seattle. It doesn't rain that much. Now, of course, a motorcycle will not do when it's about talking to the whole of Microsoft. So this is a map of all the conversations that I have. What you may want to notice that here, I'm talking about actual conversations that I had with people who on a daily basis know, engage, and respect open source. That was a great find to me. And this is why I'm really having the time of my life. And I'm not any more surprised that we have, last time I counted, more than 392 various engagements. And those lists, of course, are usually wrong, meaning that they are missing something. And those contributions go all over the place, from full-fledged content management systems to libraries. NuGet is a tool for building and packaging libraries in .NET. CoApp is a great tool for porting applications to Windows and having a build system on Windows. By the way, speaking of CoApp, my good friend and colleague Garrett is going to have a session on E141, and you may want to go and see it. So let's move to those blurs. Let's move to the fact that when I started to squint at my mobile phone, I realized that it was time to think about all those blur lines. And what are those? I have 3 for you today. I'm going to start from your computer. So what's the characteristic of those blur lines, of the spectrums? They have extremes. They have clear demarcation lines. We can find those pretty easily. So your computers may be running an open source stack. all the way. You can go up to the firmware level. You can go to the BIOS level. Or you can say, OK, I'm running a fully commercial stack, because that's what I like and prefer. But guess what? Those models exist in theory. They are very, very impractical. They don't exist in the real world. What exists in the real world is this commingling. It's this middle ground where these components go all together. And I stopped asking myself why. I stopped asking myself, what is the reason why we are choosing some components open source, some components as a commercial software, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't really matter. It's about whatever floats your boat. And I think I'm not alone in this blur. I think this blur is beneficial. I think this blur is sort of this broth that gives birth to more components that are mixing and matching. I look at the audience. I see a lot of glowing apples, so it looks like I'm not alone here. So this is what goes by the name of Mixed IT. And of course, it's not just about your computer. I'd like to spend a few minutes on the ecosystem as a whole. And again, let's define those extremes, because they allow us to at least understand where the blur is. On the one hand, you can have open source software and more open source software, augmenting it, built on top of it. And of course, on the other hand, you can have commercial software augmented by commercial software. Again, possible, but not really realistic. Everyone is working in the middle. So if we move those two aside and we squint through the blur, we're seeing some patterns emerging. The first one is a pretty known one. Goes by the name of open core. The idea is, hey, you know what? We can build a core set of features as open source. And then, of course, we need to monetize it. We need to bring it to the market. So we are going to build some value add as proprietary, as commercial software. So this model has been there. It has been discussed at length. Even before my tenure at Microsoft, I've been quite a critic. I won't delve more into that. What I'm arguing is that we are seeing a new model emerging. And this model happens to be very relevant in the cloud. We will get there in a minute, but also outside of the cloud. And it's symmetrical and opposite. I call this model, for lack of a better name, open surface. And it's characterized by having a core that you may not see. It may be commercial software. It may be run in the cloud without you knowing exactly what's going on. But then it is augmented by openness, various layers of openness. And what I like in this visual, which is, of course, biased to the way I see it, is that what matters is the outer crust. If you build an outer crust of openness, you can build on top. You can create more open source. So how do you make it happen? There are many ways. And of course, they apply partly to the other model as well. But you can do it with APIs. You can do it with protocols. You can do it with standards. And of course, you can do it with open source, which is very, very relevant even in this model. So the idea of open surface is that it's a model that is naturally inclusive, that naturally makes whomever the proponent of the model is willing to accept more contributions, willing to expand their ecosystem. And this is what we are seeing happening out there in a number of places. Or actually, I stand corrected. Because what we are seeing, and we're seeing it in a while, is the blur. So the two models coming together. So let me give you a concrete example of this and announce that, as of today, we are supporting Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 on Windows Server 2008 R2 Hyper-V, which is our virtualization technology. This is a perfect example of open surface. We run a virtualization technology. It is in our best interest to allow as much as possible to run on top of it. You may have heard that we've been in the news as contributors to the Linux kernel. I don't want to enter the debate of what positions we are. I don't really care that much. I care more about the fact that we are being noticed because we are doing something there. And we are doing that together with others who are working in this blur where all the models are mixing together. So don't take any of this categorization for granted. They are not. They just happen to be simplifications and sometimes oversimplification. This is the reality. But this is what's happening out there in the ecosystem. And more specifically, this is what's happening in the cloud. Because, you see, the cloud changes a lot of things. A lot of the yardsticks that we had before the cloud existed are not there anymore. I'm going to steal a punchline for a good friend who once told me, OK, what version of Facebook are you running? To let me understand that even basic concepts like versions of software don't apply anymore. And actually, in the cloud, you have all the technologies, and they're all, again, in the blur. Sometimes you don't even see them. And when you think about the services that you are putting together, does it really matter? Can you really tell what stack has been producing that JSON feed, that XML feed that you are consuming? It doesn't. In my opinion, or at least it does less and less. Because it's out there. We don't know what's running it. Am I saying that openness doesn't matter in the cloud? By all means, no. Openness is extremely important in the cloud. But we all need to sit down and try to understand what it means. I actually argue that in the cloud, the source code is the terms of use and the SLA, much more than the bits. And if you think about the discussion we are having about privacy, about data retention, about data portability, well, that's the case. So we want to be part of this ongoing conversation. We have been there. Actually, last year, on this very stage, we came with 4 elements of interoperability of a cloud platform, and saying that it's about data portability, it's about standards, it's about ease of migration, it's about developer choice. And my team and other teams at Microsoft have been busy during this whole year working on these 4 elements, with a specific focus maybe on developer choice, when I'm telling you that, we enabled a lot of open source components on Windows Azure. How did we do that? By working with communities, by enabling PHP to run on Azure. Did you know you can do that? And it works pretty well. By enabling Java to work on Azure. And we're not stopping there. We are working with the communities of WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, Eclipse, and others. We are working with others to enable the platform because, the cloud is inclusive by nature. And if you look at our hidden agenda, well, it's not so hidden. It makes a lot of business sense for us to be more open and more cooperative. I just want to, go through one of the announcements that we did in the past, actually pretty recent, a couple of months ago. We are helping the creators of Node.js porting their fantastic framework to the Windows platform. And we want to do that. And we did a lot of work with PHP. Actually, today, we're making 2 announcements on PHP. We have the new version of the Windows Azure for SDK for PHP available. And we are also announcing new tools that are going to help you cloud enable your apps. What do we mean by that? We're talking about tools that are going to scan your code and tell you about patterns and APIs that you are using that don't work that well in the cloud. In the PHP world, with somewhat obvious Azure bias, but nevertheless applicable to basically every cloud platform out there. And the way we did it was not by reinventing the wheel. We went out there, we found a great project called PHP Cloud Sniffer, and we designed some new rules for it. And those new rules are available for your forking pleasure today on GitHub. So go and have a look at it. And if you want to know more, my fine colleague Craig is going to tell you all about the PHP story on room E141 at 1040. So I only have 8 seconds left. I don't want to overrun. Let me end by stating how we have changed as a company. I've seen it myself in these 9 months. We have become more open. These are my contact data. These are my team's contact data. We want to work with open source communities. Let's work together. Thank you.